Okay, folks. Well, I'm very happy today because we are going to get to talk about a very important topic to patients. And if you have been following this show, you've probably heard me say always that we are either current patients, future patients, or previous patients, but everyone is going to be a patient. Nobody is going to escape healthcare. And as we enter into the healthcare ecosystem, there are a lot of issues that we might encounter. Many of these issues could actually border on the line between medicine and law. And because of that, I have invited a phenomenal lawyer. And despite the fact that, by the way, we, as doctors, we always say, stay as far as possible from lawyers, do not get close to lawyers. But this is one of the friendly lawyers. And we're very delighted to have Shelly Rosenfeld with us today from the Cancer Legal Resource Center to talk about legal rights of patients and everything pertaining to that. Shelly, welcome to the show. I should probably call you Counsel Rosenfeld, but we'll just take the formality off. Shelly and Shadi here. Welcome to Healthcare Unfiltered. And let's just start by getting to know who you are, what you do, and what got you into law.
Sure. Well, I'm first of all glad to be here, and I'm thrilled at the opportunity to speak with you and your listeners about some important issues. So I actually started off as a non-lawyer professionally. I worked as a journalist because I was very intrigued at telling people stories, and specifically in broadcasting, because I felt that seeing or hearing someone speak about something that matters to a community can be one of the most effective ways to understand news around us. So I went into journalism. However, I always had an interest in law as well, starting from when I studied my undergraduate studies at Berkeley, because I also felt that the law can be very solution oriented and help someone, in a sense, have the keys to unlock a lot of life challenges. So I was intrigued by both, and then ultimately decided to go to law school because I felt that journalists have a really important role, but they cannot intervene on someone's behalf. And I was intrigued by the intersection of law and journalism, that perhaps I could use my communication skills as a journalist, but my expertise as a lawyer to help others understand their world. So eventually I got to the Cancer Legal Resource Center. I worked in different capacities in the law, but was really intrigued by helping the cancer community, and especially in this role, because everything that we do is free. So the idea of, when people think of lawyers, as you said, sometimes people want to stay away from them. One of those reasons is because lawyers do charge a fee. So in this situation, because what we do is free, it's a really great opportunity to help others and do the work, do the best of what I loved about journalism, the best of what I loved about the law.
Yeah, I mean, if a lawyer speaks one word, it's like $500 per word. So we understand that. But no, in all kidding aside, this is amazing. Shelly, when you go into law school and after you finish law school, is the field of law now you must be subspecialized? Like, obviously we need about family law, patent law, corporate law, all of these things. How are you able to be a general lawyer, or you must specialize?
That's a really good question. Legal studies are somewhat general in nature, and then students will oftentimes take classes of which they're interested, but also try to explore the waters of different specialties. But as opposed to medicine, there really is no residency. So in a sense, a law student graduates, they take the bar for their respective state or states that they want to be licensed, and then they go out to practice. So my perspective is as follows. I think a smart lawyer can transition to other types of law. I did that. I'm not saying I'm a smart lawyer, but I think a good lawyer is one that has those skills of, first of all, empathy, trying to relate to the client or the person that they're helping, put themselves in their situation, clear communication, which is whether speaking to a judge, communicating in writing, speaking to a jury, they can boil down kind of the big picture, but then also explain the details and how they fit into that. And then understanding how the law fits in. So I certainly think that there's an opportunity to move from one specialty to another. And I think that those skills can all be developed and translatable. So I certainly think that one does not completely need to silo off to one area, but of course, lawyers tend to go down a path, but I actually did move from one to the other based on just an interest. And I think one should always follow their passion. And
Absolutely.
so those skills can definitely translate.
like what got you to is it something that you've always wanted to do, that you want to focus on patients and patients' rights since you were doing journalism, or did this evolve because you said you did different kinds? What was there something that led you decide this is what my passion is, this is what I really want to do?
That's a great question because in undergrad, the closest that I got to science was political science. So I really did not have a scientific background, although I was intrigued by health issues, especially as a journalist, because that is one area where someone could be the founder of Apple or a Supreme Court justice, and they have many different resources as well as just access to information, yet they are still affected by cancer. So that's in a sense just an area that I was very intrigued by. But as a lawyer, it is not always easy to find those jobs because I did not have that scientific background. So I followed other interests. And then when I saw the position open at the Cancer Legal Resource Center, I thought, wow, it combines an area of health related issues that I feel is so crucial. Oncology, it can really be something that changes someone's life in many health related, but also non-health related ways, kind of the non-medical
Yeah.
side effects. So here is an area where I really think that the skills that I had of really wanting to, the curiosity of a journalist and wanting to understand someone's situation, as well as clearly communicating what might be some options for them. I think those skills I can bring, and the passion for helping others, especially in the cancer community, which I think hopefully is poised for some really important scientific discoveries for treatments, but is also, there is still so much to do. And so managing side effects on the healthcare area, it might be their doctor's domain, but the side effects related to whether it's job, health
Oh,
insurance,
absolutely.
um,
There's
you know,
physical side effects, but there's other elements, and frankly, the non-physical side effects could impact quality of life and everything else. And we'll go into that in a little bit, but this is fascinating to me that you followed your passion and you found this opportunity. But Cancer Legal Resource Center did you know about this entity before, or you just kind of like you just found a job posting and you said, I'm going to apply for this? Or like, what's the history of Cancer Legal Resource Center? Can you give us just a little bit about what that is?
Sure. I actually knew about the Cancer Legal Resource Center while in law school. UC Hastings College of the Law, which has now changed its name, but at the time it was UC Hastings College of the Law. They had an opportunity to earn a pro bono distinction if someone volunteered. So I was looking for volunteer opportunities, came across the Cancer Legal Resource Center, and actually volunteered while I was in law school for a brief period, and was really intrigued. But in terms of the history of the Cancer Legal Resource Center, it was established in 1997. So it's been around now for decades, and is part of the 501c3 nonprofit Disability Rights Legal Center, which does impact litigation in terms of disability rights. But the reason that the CLRC, which is short for Cancer Legal Resource Center, is a part of that organization is because numerous rights of those with cancer, especially in employment, are disability based. So basically grounded in the American with Disabilities Act, but it is separate. It is, we don't bring lawsuits, we inform people of their rights, because just to the point that we talked about earlier, maybe someone with cancer doesn't need to work with a lawyer. They just need to know what their legal rights are, and they can
Right.
hopefully be able to handle that on their own or with the help of family member or a friend. It still takes a lot of tenacity and persistence. I wish it were easier to sometimes obtain various legal rights, but the point is that they might not need to pay a lawyer or to work with one. There might be situations where that makes sense, but in many cases, they just need to know, okay, you have rights here, and here's a good way to think about it. So I
Yeah.
think that obviously having an understanding of the law, I can help someone
Sure.
and do the research for them, but they don't need to be represented by a lawyer. So that's kind
Sure.
of how it fits in with the overall organization. The overall organization has been around for longer, but it was founded essentially on the principle that the cancer community has different needs, maybe than quote the larger disability community is more, and cancer itself is so many different types of cancers and different stages, of course. So even that includes so many different people in such a variety of different circumstances, but still, focusing on the cancer community and those specific needs.
Right. Yeah. And then, I mean, you're obviously based in California, but do you have folks that seek you out from outside of the state, or do you have other offices in different parts of the country?
So while our main office is in Los Angeles, we help nationwide. We really do get callers from everywhere. We're talking about the South, the East Coast. I mean, states that you might not normally think about as much. We do get callers, and we do have many low-income callers because what we do is free. So it certainly opens up the doors to help many other people. So yes, everything that we do is our telephone
But
assistance.
how do you get paid? I mean, at some point you need to get paid, right? I mean, you can't, I mean, I understand you don't charge patients, but I
Right.
mean, somebody has to, I mean, you need to make a living. So how do you get paid and the staff at the CLRC get paid?
So some of the main areas are grants. So for example, if there is a pharmaceutical company that believes in patient support, they don't tell us what to do. For example, if they give us support for our webinars, they are not asking me, what did you put in those webinars, or can we see them? Not at all. I'm the one that makes the webinar, so I can tell you that for sure. They just want to support and for people to know that they do care. So that is one way. Also in California, for example, lawyers who are licensed by the state bar that put their clients' money right in bank accounts, those bank accounts accrue interest. So that interest in California goes to pro bono organizations such as the Cancer Legal Resource Center. So that's another way as well. I'm not as much into kind of knowing exactly all the places where we might get funding, but that's a huge, those are some huge sources. And then just, overall other grants to support the organization.
Maybe philanthropy, I would presume some donors or things like that.
Right.
So I want to just get a little bit into detail. I mean, this is very helpful just to get a baseline, but, I have a lot of listeners who are patients and caregivers, and they're interested a little bit. Obviously, I'll put a link to your center so they know how to reach, but I really am interested in few important questions. And as somebody who's taken care of patients for many, many years and seen hundreds of patients, I have firsthand experience into some of the pain points that actually patients have. The first thing that oftentimes patients may struggle with is, do they tell their employer about the disease that they have, because they obviously get afraid that they may let go. They may not be told that they are being let go because of the cancer. They say we're cutting reduction in force. We're going to let 20 people leave, and you just happen to be one of those 20. So as somebody gets diagnosed with cancer, how do they handle their employer relationship, and what they tell and what they don't tell? Do you advise them to tell, not to tell everything, not to tell everything? How do you navigate that?
Sure. That is a key important question, and employment-related issues are one of the most common legal issues that people contact us about. So first of all, the question to tell or not to tell, that is such a personal decision. If you tell me that a patient wants to tell their employer, I say, okay. If you tell me a patient does not want to tell their employer, I say okay. And the reason is because of exactly what you described. So there are certainly, reasons why somebody would want to and why they wouldn't, but I completely respect either decision. Once someone tells their employer, they can't unring that bell, right? I mean, they hope that their employer follows the law. That is in the best interest of the employer and the employee, for the employer to follow the law. But sometimes, and the people that call us aren't the people without challenges, they're the people with challenges. We do get people that are saying that they told their boss, and unfortunately, they were passed up for a promotion, or they are no longer working at their job. We take people at their word when they call us. We don't ask for them to send any documentation of what they're sharing. We just want to help. So that is something that unfortunately has occurred to people that have contacted us. Let's think about some considerations, though, that can hopefully help someone to make the decision that is best for them. So first of all, just to briefly understand what law could apply, there's the American with Disabilities Act, or ADA. It's a federal law, so that applies nationwide. States may give more protections, but let's just stick with the federal law now because you have a wide audience. It makes it illegal for private employers with 15 or more employees to discriminate against job applicants, not just people that are working there, but job applicants or employees with disabilities. And cancer can be considered a disability. And basically, it prohibits employers from essentially firing someone because of their disability, or, for example, cancer constitutes disability because of their cancer or effects from treatment related to cancer. So first of all, the reason that someone would tell their employer is because they are seeking a reasonable accommodation. So a reasonable accommodation, that can be something, depends on the person, right? But it depends on their job, but it can be something like even, changes to a physical environment, like moving file drawers to a more accessible location, or allowing someone to work remotely for a limited amount of time. So, for example, that would be a reason. Someone can't ask for a reasonable accommodation without sharing some information with their employer. They can't just ask for that, without any context. So if someone feels that they, first of all, do not need any support right now, they're going through treatment, they're not feeling ideally, but maybe they're managing everything well, they may decide that that's not the right time to share any information. However, we do suggest that someone does, if they're going to share that information or some information with their employer, that they do so before work performance has been affected. If someone is falling asleep at their desk due to fatigue, or is, for example, needing to take more frequent breaks due to treatment, or they need to keep food at their desk and they're not normally permitted to do so, and these don't have to be massive changes when I say reasonable accommodations, but if they start doing these things and their boss sees that they're falling asleep at their desk, they could be fired because of performance issues, just like anybody else. So if they ask for a reasonable accommodation and talk to their employer, share, and they may, in certain circumstances, need to provide some medical certification, then, then they're working with their employer, and the employer maybe says, we still can't have food at the desk, we're a lab, whatever the situation is, but anytime you need to leave your desk, we'll make sure that our kitchen can support you, taking those food breaks. Oh, if you need to put your head down on your desk, or if you need to go somewhere and rest, that's perfectly fine. If you need to change, start your workday earlier because you need to leave for a doctor's appointment, we can work that out. These are just some examples. Again, we never know what might work out with that employer and what might work out for that employee the best. But the point is that someone, cannot be fired according to the law because of a cancer diagnosis, as long as they're still able to, to do the essential functions of their job. But, in that case, then they would be speaking to their employer. The question is, what do they ultimately need to share with their employer? So in that situation, what's really helpful for the employer? The employer needs to know, okay, they don't necessarily need to know the exact diagnosis, because you know oncology, but the employer doesn't. They don't. What is the significance of knowing the diagnosis if they don't know actually what is the practical effects for the employee? So in some cases, an employee may potentially be able to go there to their internal medicine doctor. So the employer only sees that, they don't see oncology in the header, but they might be able to work with an internal medicine doctor who looks at the oncologist information and says, okay, there's a patient and they have, such and such side effects due to treatment, and may be able to avoid more of the details that someone affected by cancer might be concerned about. So it can be a team effort. There are solutions out there. The employer doesn't necessarily need to know all those details. And just one more thing is that the employer must keep those medical files separate from the personnel file. They can't just have it, so that anyone can see it on their desk. That medical information has to be kept separate. So there are protections out there, but it is important for someone to know that, if they are treated differently, by their employer based on their cancer diagnosis, they should really look into what if anything can be done, because it's a very difficult situation to be in. So
I think some of the fear could be perception versus reality. So, for example, you brought in a possibility if somebody passed on for a promotion. So I tell my employer about a cancer diagnosis. I request I need to take like 2 days off a week, and I'll make them up for the weekend, whatever it is. And I get passed on for a promotion, but obviously the employer is not going to be stupid enough to say they passed me on because of my cancer diagnosis. They just, they're going to promote somebody else. I may feel I deserve the promotion, and my employer feels differently. And then the patient, feels that the employer passed them on, obviously unfairly, and nobody really knows the intention, probably. Do you get asked sometimes as a lawyer, I want to sue my employer because they did not really represent me? And are you in your capacity, in your current role, is this just legal consulting and counseling, or do you actually willing to go into a litigation, a lawsuit?
Oh, so that's also a fantastic question, because sometimes people do feel that they are discriminated against, want to take it to the next step. They may decide to file a complaint with the Equal Opportunity Employment Commission or also sue their employer. We at the Cancer Legal Resource Center, although we're lawyers, we do not take anyone on as a client. I'm licensed in California, New York, DC, but I'm not licensed in every state. So first of all, that would be impossible to represent folks. And also, we help a lot more people by not taking people on as clients. It's a lot of important work, but that's not really what we do. We don't take anyone on as clients. We just do research for that person based on national and state law and refer them to legal resources, for example, legal aids, other referral services. And if we have a lawyer that's volunteered with us to help, then we'll refer to that lawyer who volunteers half an hour of their time. I don't specialize in employment or any one particular area, because we get so many different types of calls. So we don't take someone on, but what we do is provide that research and advise someone of their rights. So if they want to talk to an employment lawyer, they already know what kinds of things that lawyer will
What
look
questions
for.
to ask? Yeah.
Yeah, and how to make that conversation count with that lawyer, because they know kind of, wow, here's the law and here's how my situation fits into it. You bring up a point. Some situations are unfair, but they're not illegal. They're just unfair. Right. So that's, a separate question. And sometimes really qualified people get passed up for a promotion just because the employer, decides that someone else who's also a strong candidate has earned that role. So it might not be because it's really the person assesses their specific circumstances. If this employer has made certain statements or, acted in certain ways, it's all the context and all the big picture. But yet, sometimes it's not always discrimination. If it is, then that's the point where they might want to speak to a lawyer if they want to sue their employer.
Are employees, in the job, for example, are they able to, so there are medical leaves in every employee's contract, I'm pretty sure, and that varies. Could be 4 weeks, could be 6 weeks, could be 8 weeks, I guess. Is there any flexibility in the law that if you have a cancer diagnosis, you are able to go and say, I need to have longer medical leave than what is in my contract, or you live by the contract and you die by the contract?
So a lot of places of employment for a full-time employee do have sick days, but you're right. When someone is affected by cancer diagnosis, they may need to use up their sick days, or they use them up quickly, and then they need more days. So there are protections out there. There's something called the Family and Medical Leave Act, or FMLA, and it allows certain employees to take up to 12 work weeks per year to take care of oneself or a certain family members with serious
This is
health
paid
conditions.
or unpaid? Unpaid or paid?
Unpaid. So
unpaid.
Yeah, it's a huge downside because someone, of course, with cancer, cancer is expensive. I heard this great quote that no one makes money after their diagnosis. It takes up a financial hit no matter what circumstances someone is in. So having a salary is important. I don't minimize that, but FMLA does allow someone to keep their job and their health insurance. And sometimes that health insurance can be worth, the amount of a salary, even, because healthcare costs are so high. So it does allow someone to keep their job and their health insurance.
So
So
you brought me to health insurance. I want to pivot to the health insurance because a lot of folks worry from a patient perspective that if I actually, because the health insurance company has the right to look at your medical records. I mean, the life insurance company, I'm sorry. When I got in life insurance policy, they requested medical records, all of these things. So from a health insurance, the medical insurance, as well as the life insurance, let's talk about health insurance first. If you are a patient, are they able, when they have to renew your policy, to increase your premium and deductible based on what you consumed the year before? And from a life insurance standpoint, people get afraid that they will be denied a life insurance policy because of their health issues. So they cannot actually buy a life insurance policy. And if they buy it, it's so expensive that it becomes cost prohibitive. Talk to us a little bit about the medical insurance, health insurance type of things, as well as the life insurance type of thing from a patient perspective and family perspective, if you can.
Sure. I mean, this can be a whole separate podcast in itself.
I know.
In terms
That's
of,
why we try to fit everything in one podcast.
I know. So I'll just touch upon it briefly, and to say as follows, right? The Affordable Care Act did make some changes, and someone, of course, cannot be denied health insurance coverage based on a pre-existing condition. In fact, before even, a woman in some cases was charged higher health insurance rates, not even talking about cancer, but just because women tended to be considered to have higher healthcare costs due to pregnancy. So that has changed. Really, only someone's location, for example, can be taken into consideration. Certain cities have higher healthcare
But they
costs.
can increase the premium, right? I mean, I think the concern is not the denied. So, for example, they say, we are going to give you the insurance, but your deductible is $10,000 a year and your premium is if you, I guess the question becomes how much do we have as patients? Do we have the right to say, I got cancer, it wasn't really my fault, and now you're making my deductible and my monthly premium so high, it didn't really help me. Like, it's almost having insurance on paper. That's my concern.
Right. Well, when someone, if someone cannot buy health insurance, and they're going through private exchanges, of course, that will be more expensive. But that, in terms of actual, someone being punished by cancer, we have not, gotten that call, certainly since the Affordable Care Act, about someone based on their cancer being charged all of a sudden a different premium. Life insurance is challenging after a cancer diagnosis. It's not impossible, but I completely empathize. Just to contrast that, the chance of securing a policy depends greatly on type, stage, and grade of the cancer, and even the treatment plan. So yes, there is a relationship between the rate someone will receive and the curability of cancer. Applicants with a common and treatable form of breast or prostate cancer this is just by way of example, may be able to get a standard rating under ideal circumstances, but someone with, a certain history or a later stage cancer may fall into, a substandard or high substandard rating. So that, that is very frustrating. I completely empathize with that. Sometimes this is the big picture. When someone hears information like this and they're frustrated, I say, first of all, it's important to know the landscape, what's out there. I always say, we don't recommend specific insurance companies or anything like that, but I would say someone to do their homework as well. And then finally, if people want the law to change, you have to know what the law is in the first place. So, hopefully one day that will be different, that will not, people will not be treated this way in terms of life insurance. But we first maybe can use health insurance more as a model, and then, hopefully with better treatments out there and more talking about cancer, it will be, I'm hoping, less stigmatized and less of a challenge for people to get life insurance coverage at a more affordable rate.
So genetic testing is another thing that from a patient perspective, they worry about. And they worry about this just because, again, it affects life insurance policies as well as premiums. So genetic testing, you're not a patient, let's say, you don't have cancer. You are the relative of a patient who has cancer, and the doctor of that patient recommended that family members undergo genetic testing to check if they have the gene that led to this cancer. So as a family member of that particular patient, you are in a conundrum right now. Because if you do the test and you are found to have that gene, you worry about the premiums and the deductibles of your health insurance. And again, you worry about the life insurance policy. And so when it comes to genetic testings for diseases that are passed on from families to relatives, what does the law say and what are the rights of the patients as well as the relatives of the patients who might be affected with cancer?
So one important issue is exactly that. And certainly we want the law to encourage people to get genetic testing. It can actually hopefully save healthcare costs if someone's being monitored closely, and obviously could be in the best interest of the patient to know what they might be able to screen for. So there's something called Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act, abbreviated GINA, G-I-N-A. It prohibits health insurers and employers from discriminating on the basis of genetic information. So under GINA, genetic information is defined as an individual's family medical history as well as the results of a genetic test, either for themselves or for a family member. And that includes genetic counseling, other genetic services, and participation in genetic research. So that genetic information, it does not include information about individuals' current health status or diseases that they currently have. But for example, if a person has taken a BRCA genetic test to determine their risk for breast cancer, this is genetic information. So just to keep that in mind, health insurance companies are prohibited from restricting enrollment or adjusting premiums, contribution amounts, or coverage terms based on a person's genetic information. So that's, I think, an important thing, to keep in mind.
So
But
there are rights, like, if a patient feels, they should not undergo genetic testing because of that fear. If they feel they are being discriminated against, they should seek legal counsel.
right, they should certainly look into what options they have. Yes, because I think that's very important to recognize that they cannot be discriminated against just because of that genetic testing. And it does make sense. Who would want to get testing if they know that information could be used?
I mean, but it's a fear that exists with patients, right? I mean, it's just a real thing that patients and families are afraid about. How about, I mean, do you get sometimes people who are saying they have been denied a particular test or a procedure or a medication that their doctor feels might help because the insurance company said, well, we're not going to pay for it. It is not on our formulary. It is not, there's not enough data. So there are sometimes patients and families say, our insurance company is not paying for a PET scan. They're not paying for a medication that my doctor prescribed. And I need that medication. I believe it's going to help me. My doctor believes it's going to help me. What do you advise me? How do you advise in this scenario where there's this disconnect? The insurance company doesn't want to pay for a test or a medication, and the patient and the doctor, they want to give that medication and the test.
Right. So formulary list of approved medications, the person that comes up with that is not your oncologist, it's the insurance company. So that's a huge issue for patients. They have a treatment that their oncologist says they should be taking. They try to get that covered by their health insurance company and it is denied. So on top of all that, then they're having to consider, what are my options? They don't have a lot of time to wait. So the Cancer Legal Resource Center, we always say appeal. Even if it feels like you already have to start some other treatment in the meantime, I would always suggest to appeal. But the key thing, and we always say this in our presentations, and we actually have a webinar tomorrow, but we, depending on when someone's listening to this, I'll just say we have a webinar series called Know Your Rights. But the point is that we always say, open your mail, because if you are denied that appeal, it is really important, or if you're rather denied even that coverage, that denial letter that people just want to throw away, if you keep reading, it says the deadline to which to appeal. And it is really important, because you could have the best case, but if you don't appeal in time, then you're missing the deadline. So keep reading, even though you don't want to, and look at that deadline. I would always say appeal. There's no downside except for using some of your time and, of course, the frustration. And your doctor can be an ally in that appeal and say why it is medically necessary for you to receive that medication. And then if that appeal is still denied, keep reading on, because there'll be other mechanisms you may be able to, once you've exhausted all the internal appeals, there are also external appeals. So it is definitely worth fighting for.
No, I agree with you. I think
Yeah.
the biggest issue with cancer patients obviously is time, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think a lot of times these processes take a long time, and as you articulated, Shelly, many patients don't have the luxury of and the bandwidth of dealing with time, and I think that is a big issue. Do you help in terms of financial aspects? Like, I'll share a story with you that I was one time a patient of mine that had a stage 4 cancer was asking me about what do I do with my 401k, and I didn't really know what to say, because I wasn't really sure. I couldn't provide financial advice. He's like, do I just take the money and do whatever I want with them? Like, so is this part of the questions that sometimes you get asked? Is this a resource that you provide for patients?
Well, certainly people do call with financial concerns. It's commonly referred to as financial toxicity. Just to be clear, we don't provide any financial assistance ourselves in terms of funding. However, we will provide information about different organizations that may be helpful. A lot of times the financial questions come up with if someone has concerns about medical billing errors, it comes up in different ways. But in terms of tapping into a 401k in those situations, I would certainly, there are certain reasons why someone is allowed to certainly tap into their 401k in terms of medical necessity of those withdrawals. So in that case, I would certainly say that someone should speak to a financial advisor and evaluate their situation in terms of whether that makes sense for them. But so we don't necessarily get that specific type of question in which to assist, but we do get a lot of financial questions, and a lot of times being able to keep someone's job, finding out about income replacement with Social Security if they can't work for a really long time, or just maintaining their health insurance, are some key initial solutions to consider.
Yeah. So I've asked you a lot of questions in terms of what I think these are important for patients. Any other questions you see very commonly asked by the folks that call you and seek your counsel and seek your opinion that I may have forgotten or did not really touch upon?
Well, we'd certainly get questions in terms of Social Security disability. If someone needs to take a longer time off of the job, some people face housing concerns, or some people want to consider advanced
the
planning.
bills, right? I mean, can they actually call the electric company and the heating company and say, hey, do they have any rights to appeal for these companies, say, can you defer my payments for 6 months without cutting my electricity or heat?
Well, I certainly would recommend always trying that. There may not be necessarily any specific rights, but I will say that coming up with a payment plan with a variety of different service providers, that might be something, especially nowadays, and since the pandemic, when many people have been affected by financial challenges, is worth a try. And so hopefully they'll be able to work something out. But there's not always necessarily specific rights out there. But and then I'll say, people do contact us about questions about advanced planning, estate planning. And I just want to say the following, which is I think sometimes it's a difficult conversation, especially for a doctor, because if somebody's coming to their oncologist and the oncologist says, well, you might want to think about creating a will, that can really be difficult. And all I'll have to say is, unfortunately, no one lives forever. I wish it was the case, but unfortunately, no one lives forever. So
you're such a buzzkill. I wanted to live forever, but that's okay.
I don't need to break that on a medical podcast, but I just want to say one thing. If someone has been confronted with that conversation, is just that for them to keep in mind, yes, no one lives forever, and there is a way to have their wishes live beyond their life, whatever their lifespan is, whatever their health situation is. So at least to consider that in order to protect, what they have or what they care about, even if they don't have that much, to be able to spell it out can be actually a very helpful thing for anyone that cares about them, and for them to express their wishes in the future.
I really appreciate your time, Shelly. You've given us a lot of time, and I know that we had, I think I've exceeded my welcome, because I know you didn't have a lot of time today, but I know that a lot of my listeners would really appreciate the time that you provided, and hopefully they will check the Legal Resource Center. Any final comments before I'll let you go? And I'm very thankful for your time.
Just that I hope someone checks out the Cancer Legal Resource Center website. We have webinars that I've led, as well as upcoming webinars, and then they can fill out an intake for free. We will help for free. And if someone's a lawyer, they can look into ways to volunteer with us on very minimal commitment to help someone affected by cancer.
I would volunteer. I'm not a lawyer, but I would volunteer. Well, Shelly Rosenfeld on Healthcare Unfiltered from the Cancer Legal Resource Center. Thank you so much for spending some time with us this morning.
Glad to be here.